Have you ever wondered what happens when a privileged amateur tries to bury the architect of the exact data system she is destroying? They think family power can bend numbers to secure a $300 million valuation. They forget one rule in Silicon Valley: people lie, but server logs never do. I simply stepped back and let her enjoy that illusion of power, only to tear down her entire stage in front of ruthless Wall Street auditors. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories. I want to sincerely thank you for your continuous support, but unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with no budget to keep operating. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us by joining our Patreon community, where you can listen to exclusive, longer, and incredibly detailed real-life revenge stories featuring multiple emotional voice actors that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can join right now by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link in the video description or the pinned comment. Now, let us dive into today's story. And my name is Riley Wilson. I am 34 years old, and for the past 5 years, I have poured my blood, sweat, and sanity into a cybersecurity firm called Horizon Sentinel. As the lead data architect, I was the one who designed the impenetrable digital vaults that kept our corporate clients safe from hackers. We were not just some scrappy startup anymore. We were standing right on the edge of a massive initial public offering, with Wall Street analysts valuing our company at roughly $300 million. The energy in the office was electric, fueled by a mixture of sheer exhaustion and the promise of massive stock payouts. Everyone was working 80-hour weeks to ensure the system was absolutely flawless. Then, the CEO decided to give his son a wedding present. Her name was Chloe Vance. She had just married the boss's son, and as a reward, she was suddenly parachuted into the executive suite with a freshly invented title. She became our new director of strategic innovation. Chloe was a woman who thought walking into a server room wearing $3,000 designer suits and stilettos automatically commanded respect. She possessed zero technical background, yet she compensated for her ignorance by aggressively regurgitating empty technology buzzwords she clearly memorized from morning business podcasts. She would corner exhausted engineers in the break room and confidently tell them they needed to leverage paradigm shifts and synergize cross-platform ecosystems. Her entire demeanor was dripping with condescension, acting as though we were a group of outdated dinosaurs and she was the brilliant visionary sent to save us all. Less than 2 weeks into her tenure, Chloe made her first major move. She called a mandatory department-wide meeting and announced that she was completely overhauling our entire data storage protocol. She demanded that we migrate our highly classified, proprietary client data to a flashy, generic new cloud system. Her justification was simply process optimization. I was absolutely floored. I stood up in the meeting and tried to politely explain that as a cybersecurity firm, moving our core architecture to an unverified third-party cloud was a catastrophic security risk. "Riley, you are just being resistant to change," she sneered, examining her perfectly manicured nails while looking at me with pure pity. "We need to adopt a disruptive mindset. Your anti-innovation attitude is exactly why legacy employees struggle to survive in a modern, dynamic corporate culture. We are going to the cloud." I did not just take her word for it. I spent the next 48 hours doing a deep dive into the technical specifications of her proposed cloud vendor. What I found was horrifying. The system was riddled with fatal vulnerabilities, outdated encryption standards, and massive blind spots in the administrative access layers. I compiled a meticulously detailed risk assessment report, outlining exactly how this migration could expose our clients to severe breaches, and I placed it directly on her desk. She barely glanced at the first page before pushing it aside. She publicly labeled my valid security warnings as toxic negativity, making it clear to management that anyone who opposed her migration was an enemy of progress. The timing could not have been worse. The independent audit delegation from one of the Big Four accounting firms finally arrived to begin their rigorous due diligence for the IPO. Suddenly, the office was crawling with cold. Calculating financial and technical auditors from Wall Street, they were turning every single file, server log, and compliance certificate upside down. The pressure on our engineering team was colossal. A single failed security check could tank the entire $300 million valuation. Yet, oblivious to the existential threat hanging over our heads, Chloe just kept recklessly pushing her cloud migration forward, desperate to claim it as her signature achievement before the company went public. I knew exactly what happens when arrogant privilege collides with immutable data. I realized that reasoning with her was completely useless, and I refused to let her destroy the fortress I had spent years building. Before she could finalize her administrative takeover and lock me out of the core infrastructure, I stayed late on a Friday evening. While the office was completely empty, I bypassed the main network and silently cloned our entire original, secure data architecture. I transferred every single line of code, every security protocol, and every encrypted vault into an independent physical server hidden safely in a restricted access rack. I was securing my own life raft. Chloe was determined to seize full control of the ship and steer it straight into an iceberg, but I was absolutely making sure that when she crashed, I would hold the only surviving blueprint. The suffocation did not begin with a loud argument. It started with a quiet, systematic digital execution. I would log into my workstation at 8 o'clock in the morning, only to find my administrative privileges mysteriously downgraded. Folders containing the core architecture I had built from scratch suddenly displayed bright red access denied messages. When I marched over to the information technology department to demand an explanation, the technicians awkwardly avoided eye contact, mumbling about new restructuring directives coming directly from the executive suite. Chloe was meticulously building an invisible wall around me. She began hiring external consultants, an endless parade of expensive sycophants who nodded at her every empty buzzword, and she swiftly transferred all my critical deployment projects to them. I was being turned into a ghost within my own department, forced to sit at my desk and watch as absolute amateurs aggressively butchered the very systems I had spent years engineering. The real psychological blow landed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. My mentor, the veteran chief technology officer who had steered this company through its toughest early years, was unexpectedly summoned to the executive boardroom. He was a brilliant man, someone who commanded absolute respect through sheer technical competence. I watched the heavy frosted glass door click shut behind him, sealing him inside with the chief executive officer and Chloe. 2 agonizing hours later, a generic, company-wide email landed in our inboxes announcing his sudden, immediate decision to take early retirement. There was no farewell party. There was no transitional period. The man was simply erased from the organizational chart by 5 o'clock that same evening. The message to the rest of the engineering floor was loud and terrifyingly clear. If the most senior technical leader could be unceremoniously discarded for standing in the way of the family, absolutely none of us were safe. The very next morning, my desk phone rang. It was Chloe's assistant, requesting my immediate presence in her newly renovated, sprawling corner office. When I walked in, Chloe was pouring herself a cup of artisanal tea, wearing a saccharine, perfectly practiced smile that did not reach her cold eyes. She gestured for me to sit on a terribly uncomfortable modern sofa. "Riley, I wanted to have an open, honest chat with you," she began, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "I know transitions are difficult, especially for people who have been stuck in the exact same role for a long time. The technology landscape is moving at lightning speed. We are building a dynamic, agile future here, and to be perfectly blunt, your methodologies are feeling a bit outdated. You are struggling to keep up with my vision." She took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, letting the heavy silence fill the room, wrapping around me like a vice. "I would hate to see someone with your historical tenure get formally terminated during such a critical financial audit period," she continued, her tone shifting into a faux sympathetic whisper. "It would look absolutely terrible on your professional resume. Perhaps you should take a few days to think about exploring opportunities elsewhere, while you still have the dignity to step down voluntarily." It was textbook psychological manipulation. She wanted me to panic, to internalize the gaslighting, and to quietly pack my cardboard boxes so she would not have to deal with the messy legal paperwork of firing a senior architect without cause. I gave her nothing. I kept my face entirely neutral, nodded slowly as if absorbing her words, and walked out without saying a single syllable. I immediately returned to my desk, determined to escalate the situation over her head. I drafted a heavily documented email to the entire board of directors, attaching the raw security logs that proved her new system migration was already causing localized data leaks. I hit send. An hour later, I logged into the internal Exchange server to verify the delivery receipts. The email was gone. I frantically checked my sent folder. Nothing. I checked the deleted items. Completely empty. A cold chill ran down my spine. Someone with root access was actively scrubbing my outgoing communications from the internal mail servers. My warnings were not just being ignored. They were being digitally intercepted and vaporized into thin air. I was completely quarantined from the outside world. The atmosphere on the engineering floor became suffocating. Paranoia infected the entire team. Nobody spoke in the break room anymore. It was during one of these tense, silent afternoons that a junior systems administrator nervously slid his chair over to my desk. He kept his eyes locked on his monitors, frantically pretending to type, while he barely whispered in my direction. He told me that while processing some vendor approvals in the finance queue, he noticed Chloe was secretly pushing through massive, unbudgeted invoices. We were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars being funneled to a completely anonymous hardware supplier under a classified operational budget simply labeled Project Zephyr. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he added that the billing was exclusively for heavy-duty processing servers, the kind of hardware we never used for standard cybersecurity storage. My mind raced, violently piecing together the fragmented clues. The aggressive push to clear out our old servers, the sudden firing of the chief technology officer, the scrubbing of my emails, and now, secret hardware acquisitions draining our operational capital right before a major valuation. The terrifying truth finally crystallized in my mind. This was never about a naive, privileged executive pushing for modern innovation. This was not a rookie making stupid mistakes. Chloe was utilizing the untouchable shield of her family name to mask a highly sophisticated, systemic operation for personal gain, and she was using my department to do it. The glow of my dual monitors cast long, harsh shadows across my empty apartment. It was past midnight, and the city outside was drowned in a relentless downpour, a perfect backdrop for the digital burglary I was about to commit against my own employer. They had meticulously stripped away my administrative credentials, locked my keycard out of the physical server rooms, and built a digital fortress to keep me entirely isolated. But Chloe made one fundamental miscalculation. She was a tourist in a city I built from the ground up. You cannot lock the architect out of the house when she poured the concrete and buried her own secret blueprints beneath the floorboards. 5 years ago, during the very first beta build of the Horizon Sentinel infrastructure, I had coded a dormant, heavily encrypted backdoor into the foundational layer of the network registry. It was a failsafe, a phantom access point designed strictly for catastrophic system failures. It possessed no user interface, generated no visual footprint, and required a sequence of manual command lines that looked like absolute gibberish to anyone who did not write them. Someone who bought their technology vocabulary from a business magazine would never even know where to look. I cracked my knuckles, opened a black terminal window, and began to type. The system hesitated for a fraction of a second before authenticating my shadow credentials. I was in. I was completely invisible, floating through the company intranet like a ghost in the machine. I immediately bypassed the superficial executive dashboards and dived straight into the raw, unfiltered data streams of the finance and hardware allocation directories. I needed to find out what Project Zephyr really was. I routed my search parameters to isolate the vendor invoices that Junior Administrator had warned me about. The digital paper trail was heavily obfuscated, buried under layers of corporate shell companies. But the hardware delivery manifests could not be faked. I pulled up the technical specifications of the incoming servers. My breath hitched in my throat. These were not enterprise-grade storage arrays designed to hold secure client data. They were massive, liquid-cooled rigs, packed with top-tier graphic processing units. They were purely computational engines. I cross-referenced the physical deployment logs to find out where these beasts were plugged in. They were hidden away in a secondary, off-site cooling facility that we rarely utilized. I tapped into the facility power grid monitors, and the truth hit me with the force of a freight train. The electricity consumption in that specific sector was completely off the charts, drawing enough megawatts to power a small suburban neighborhood. The bandwidth utilization was equally insane, running consistently at maximum capacity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I dug into the executive reporting folder to see how Chloe was justifying this colossal drain on the company resources to the board of directors and the Wall Street auditors. There it was, a beautifully formatted, 70-page presentation claiming that Project Zephyr was a revolutionary, in-house artificial intelligence engine. The report stated that the massive hardware and power costs were necessary for running complex machine learning algorithms, testing advanced predictive security models to make our software smarter. It was an absolute stroke of manipulative genius. Wall Street investors practically throw money at anything labeled artificial intelligence. The fake project not only explained away the bleeding operational costs, but actively inflated our impending $300 million valuation by making the company appear highly innovative. But I knew the rhythm of data, and the data flowing out of that facility was not artificial intelligence. Machine learning creates erratic, unpredictable processing spikes as the models learn and fail. The data stream I was monitoring was a steady, relentless, repetitive hum. It was a cryptographic hashing rhythm. I pulled a packet capture from the outbound traffic, decoding the destination protocols. Chloe was not building an artificial intelligence engine. She had transformed the company budget into a massive, privately owned cryptocurrency mine. She was using our capital to buy the hardware, using our corporate accounts to pay the astronomical electricity bills, and quietly siphoning the generated digital currency straight into her personal pockets. I traced the outbound mining pool connections and hit the jackpot. The destination address for the mined assets was hard-coded directly into the script. I ran a localized search of Chloe internal communication logs and found an encrypted note application synced to her company phone. Inside that note was the exact same digital wallet address. It was the smoking gun, undeniable, irrefutable. Cryptographic proof linking the newly appointed executive director directly to a massive corporate embezzlement scheme. I rapidly began downloading the log files, compiling the power records, the hardware manifests, and the wallet destination code into a heavily encrypted folder on my local drive. I was halfway through the transfer when my screen flashed a violent, blinding yellow. A secondary command window violently popped open on my desktop. The internal security suite, a new external program Chloe had apparently hired her sycophants to install, had detected an anomalous data pull from the restricted Zephyr directory. It did not know who I was yet, but it knew an unauthorized shadow user was actively scraping the system. A digital counter appeared in the corner of my terminal, rapidly tracing the origin Internet Protocol address of my connection. It was bouncing through the proxies I had set up, stripping them away one by one. I had precisely 20 seconds before the system pierced my final firewall and broadcasted my exact physical location and hardware identifier straight to Chloe's security team. Panic flooded my veins. My fingers flew across the keyboard, desperately typing the termination sequences to kill the download and sever the connection. The transfer bar crawled at an agonizingly slow pace, 95%, 97%. The tracer was tearing through my second-to-last proxy. If they logged my local machine, they would have a legal pretext to send the police to my door for corporate espionage. 100%. The folder clamped shut. I did not even bother typing the exit command. The tracer was 3 seconds away from exposing me. I lunged forward, grabbed the thick Ethernet cable plugged into the back of my custom workstation, and brutally yanked it out of the port. The terminal window froze instantly. The connection died. I sat there in the deafening silence of my apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. staring at the disconnected error message on the screen. I was completely cut off from the network, but as I looked down at the encrypted file safely resting on my hard drive, a cold, predatory smile crept across my face. They missed me by a fraction of a second, and now I held the weapon that would destroy her. The storm finally broke on a Thursday morning, completely shattering the fragile tension that had been hanging over the engineering floor. The Big Four auditors were not just thorough, they were absolute financial predators. They possessed an uncanny ability to smell hidden liabilities, and they had finally dug their claws into the operational expenditure reports. The massive, bleeding financial hole created by the server costs could no longer be hidden behind generic corporate jargon. I watched through the soundproof glass walls of the executive suite as the lead auditor, a severe woman in a sharp gray suit, slammed a thick binder onto the mahogany table. She was demanding immediate answers from the board of directors regarding the staggering electricity bills and the astronomical hardware invoices associated with the off-site facility. The entire $300 million initial public offering was suddenly hanging by a frayed thread. I sat at my desk, quietly waiting for the inevitable explosion. I assumed the executives would finally realize they had been played, that their golden child had defrauded them. I underestimated the sheer, vicious cunning of a cornered animal with limitless family resources. Without warning, the screen of my company laptop violently flickered. A stark white progress bar materialized across the center of my monitor. The cooling fans roared to life, spinning at maximum capacity as a remote administrative command executed a hard wipe of my entire local drive. I tried to interrupt the sequence, hitting keyboard shortcuts and attempting a manual hard reset, but the hardware was completely locked. I sat there in stunned silence, watching 10 years of my professional life. My project notes, my performance reviews, and my internal communications evaporate into digital dust in less than 60 seconds. The screen went pitch black, displaying only a standard corporate logo and a message that my device was deactivated. Before I could even stand up to demand an explanation, a heavy hand fell on my shoulder. I turned around to see the head of building security looming over me. He did not say a word. He simply gestured toward the elevator. I was escorted down to the second floor, away from the bustling engineering department, and led into a windowless, freezing conference room. The Director of Human Resources and the Chief Legal Counsel were already seated at the table, their faces completely devoid of any emotion. They did not offer me a chair. The legal counsel slid a thick manila folder across the cold table. "Riley, effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending a formal criminal investigation for gross misuse of corporate assets and unauthorized financial diversion," the legal counsel stated, his voice flat and robotic. I reached for the folder and opened it. Inside was a stack of perfectly fabricated procurement documents, hardware requisitions, and facility authorization forms for the covert mining operation. I felt the blood drain entirely from my face. At the bottom of every single page, glaring back at me, was my own encrypted digital signature. Chloe had not just used the company budget. She had hijacked my administrative identity. Accompanying the approvals were forged email chains, brilliantly engineered to look exactly like my writing style, where I supposedly requested the liquid-cooled graphic processing units to run an unauthorized, independent artificial intelligence experiment. She had meticulously framed me as a rogue engineer who had gone completely mad with power, draining company resources for a personal pet project. Before I could even utter a word of defense, the heavy wooden door creaked open. Chloe walked into the room. She was wearing a pristine white blazer, looking absolutely immaculate, and carrying an expression of profound, theatrical disappointment. She took a seat next to the legal counsel, folding her hands neatly on the table. "I am so deeply saddened by this, Riley," Chloe whispered, her voice dripping with artificial sorrow. She looked at the human resources director, playing the role of the merciful leader to absolute perfection. "When the auditors uncovered this massive discrepancy this morning, I simply could not believe you would abuse our trust like this. We gave you everything. We relied on your technical expertise, and you used it to build an unauthorized sandbox that nearly bankrupted our operational budget. The sheer audacity of her lie was suffocating. She was looking right into my eyes, knowing perfectly well that she was the one siphoning the money, yet acting as if my imaginary betrayal had broken her heart. However, Chloe continued, letting out a heavy, dramatic sigh, I understand that the pressure of the upcoming public offering has been immensely stressful for all the legacy employees. I convinced the board that destroying your life over a misguided technical experiment would be cruel. We do not want a public scandal right now. She slid a second document across the table. It was a separation agreement. If you sign this quiet resignation today and formally take responsibility for the unauthorized resource allocation, we will not press criminal charges. The company will absorb the financial loss. We will even provide you with a modest severance package to help you transition. You walk away quietly, and this stays entirely out of the courts. But if you try to fight this, our legal team will absolutely bury you. You will face federal charges for wire fraud and corporate sabotage. I was standing on the absolute precipice, a decade of sleepless nights, brilliant code, and unwavering loyalty was being reduced to a dirty severance check and a ruined reputation. The natural, burning instinct was to scream. I wanted to flip the heavy conference table, grab her by her pristine white collar, and tear her fragile lies to pieces right in front of the lawyers. I wanted to tell them about the cryptocurrency, the deleted emails, and the shadow network. But I did not. I looked at the legal counsel, then at the human resources director, and finally, I locked eyes with Chloe. I saw the desperate, hungry anticipation hiding just beneath her fake sympathy. She needed me to sign that paper right now. She needed the scapegoat locked in before the auditors dug any deeper into the actual data packets. The memory of the encrypted hard drive sitting safely on my desk at home anchored me. I let a slow, bitter, defeated smile creep across my face. I let my shoulders slump, perfectly mimicking the body language of a completely broken woman who realized she was totally outmatched by family wealth and corporate power. This is a very heavy accusation and a highly complex legal document, I said softly, keeping my voice utterly hollow. I am not signing anything without reading it thoroughly. Give me 48 hours to review the severance agreement. Chloe narrowed her eyes for a fraction of a second, analyzing my defeated posture, believing she had successfully crushed my spirit and cornered me into submission. Her saccharine smile returned. Of course, Riley, take 48 hours, she replied sweetly. Take your personal belongings and go home. We will expect your signature by Monday morning. I nodded silently, turned on my heel, and walked out of the freezing room, leaving my security badge on the table. I was leaving the building as a suspended, disgraced employee, but deep down, my blood was practically humming with pure adrenaline. She had played her final, ruthless card. Now, it was my turn to burn her entire kingdom to the ground. Friday evening arrived, bringing with it a sickening display of premature victory. My phone buzzed relentlessly with social media notifications from oblivious colleagues. Chloe had rented out an exclusive rooftop lounge downtown for a lavish, unofficial pre-initial public offering celebration. Through the glowing screen of my phone, I watched videos of her laughing, clinking crystal glasses of expensive champagne, and posing for photos with the executive team. She was basking in the glory of her flawless triumph, absolutely certain she had neutralized her only threat. In her mind, I was just a broken, defeated legacy employee, sitting alone in a dark apartment, crying over my ruined career and preparing to sign a non-disclosure agreement for a pathetic severance check on Monday morning. I was indeed in my apartment, but there were absolutely no tears. I walked over to my desk, unlocked the heavy steel drawer, and carefully lifted out the physical hard drive. It was cold to the touch, a dense brick of metal containing the untouched, original network architecture and the heavily encrypted digital evidence I had barely managed to extract before my connection was severed. I plugged it into my high-performance personal workstation and watched the secure volume mount on my screen. I knew perfectly well that playing by standard corporate rules was a guaranteed suicide mission. Sending an anonymous tip to the ethics hotline or submitting a formal grievance to the Human Resources Department would be completely useless. The Human Resources Director was merely a corporate puppet, and the Chief Legal Counsel was an attack dog. They were not designed to protect the truth. They were designed to protect the impending $300 million valuation at absolutely any cost. If I handed them this hard drive, they would immediately destroy the evidence, wipe the server logs, and expedite my criminal prosecution to permanently silence me. I did not need an internal investigation. I needed a public execution, performed in front of an audience whose integrity could not be bought. I needed the Wall Street auditors. I opened a terminal window, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and began to write code. I was not drafting a complaint. I was engineering a highly aggressive, self-executing digital weapon. I spent the next 14 hours locked in absolute concentration. I wrote a script designed to silently bypass the standard local area network security protocols and inject itself directly into the central audiovisual matrix of the main executive boardroom. I meticulously routed the live, real-time data packets originating from Chloe's secret cryptocurrency mining servers straight into the primary presentation display interface. However, simply projecting the truth onto a screen was not enough. The moment they saw the numbers, her sycophants would scramble to cut the feed. I needed to ensure they were completely paralyzed. To achieve this, I coded a highly complex digital deadman switch. I hard-coded a command sequence that would trigger a cascading lockdown protocol across the entire executive network the exact millisecond the presentation script was activated. Once I pushed the button, Chloe's expensive, superficial security software would instantly crash. All administrative credentials would be immediately revoked. The boardroom projectors would permanently lock onto my data stream, and the local input controls would be utterly useless. No one in that building, not the information technology technicians, not the chief executive officer, and certainly not Chloe, would possess the administrative authority to stop the broadcast. It was a digital guillotine, and I spent the entire weekend making sure the blade was flawlessly sharp. Monday morning finally arrived. It was the day of the final valuation sign-off. The morning the $300 million deal was supposed to be permanently cemented with the audit partners. I walked to my closet and pulled out a tailored, charcoal gray suit. It was not just business attire. It was my armor. I dressed with slow, methodical precision, checking my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were cold, completely devoid of fear or hesitation. Before leaving, I reached into my coat pocket and retrieved a thick, black plastic card. When Human Resources suspended me and confiscated my standard employee badge, they completely forgot about the unrestricted, zero-level master physical keycard. It was a phantom credential, issued exclusively to the lead data architect during the initial building construction phase, completely off the standard security books. I stepped out into the crisp morning air and hailed a taxi. As I watched the city blur past the window, a terrifying sense of calm washed over me. I was no longer a desperate employee begging to keep her job. I had absolutely nothing left to lose, and that made me the most dangerous person in the entire city. I strode through the towering, revolving glass doors of the Horizon Sentinel headquarters. I did not avoid the gaze of the security guards. I walked right past them with the cold, unstoppable momentum of a ghost returning to haunt the very people who murdered her. I was ready to shatter the arrogant illusion of the Vance family empire, one line of code at a time. The heavy glass doors of the main executive boardroom were completely transparent, offering a perfect, unobstructed view of the final act. Inside, the atmosphere was electric with impending wealth. Chloe was standing at the head of the massive mahogany table, radiating absolute confidence. She was delivering her final presentation to the chief executive officer and the lead partners from the Big Four auditing firm. A pristine, flawlessly forged financial report rested in the center of the table, waiting for the final signatures that would officially lock in the $300 million valuation. The chief executive officer was beaming with overwhelming pride, watching his daughter-in-law secure his legacy. I did not knock. I simply pushed the heavy glass doors open, the metallic click echoing like a gunshot in the perfectly quiet room. Every head snapped in my direction. The chief executive officer immediately shot out of his leather chair, his face flushing with absolute fury. "Riley, what in the world are you doing here?" he barked, his voice vibrating with rage. "You are suspended. Security should have escorted you off the premises days ago. Leave this room immediately before I have you arrested for trespassing." Chloe stepped forward, her perfectly manicured hands resting on the edge of the table. She adopted that same sickeningly sweet, fake sympathetic tone she had used in her office. "Please, let us not make a scene," Chloe said softly, turning to the auditors with an apologetic smile. "This is a former employee who is currently undergoing a rather difficult mental health crisis following a termination. I will handle this." I ignored her completely. I did not look at the chief executive officer, and I did not address the auditors. I kept my eyes entirely locked on Chloe as I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I opened the secure terminal application I had built over the weekend. A single, large red execution button glowed brightly on the screen. "You should not have touched my servers," I said, my voice completely flat and ice cold. I tapped the screen. The execution was instantaneous. The massive digital projector dominating the boardroom wall violently flickered. Chloe's beautiful hollow presentation slides detailing the fake artificial intelligence project were instantly vaporized. The executive network went into complete lockdown. The lighting system dimmed automatically, and a stark black terminal interface took over the 70-inch screen. First, the screen populated with a massive, real-time data graph. It displayed the exact staggering kilowatt electricity usage of the off-site facility. Next to it, a financial ticker began calculating the operational costs draining from the company budget second by second. Then came the undeniable kill shot. A live feed of a cryptocurrency wallet materialized on the screen, showing a massive influx of freshly mined digital assets. A bold, unmissable line of code bridged the two datasets, tracing the exact path from the company hardware directly into the personal digital wallet belonging to Chloe Vance. But I did not stop there. The right side of the screen suddenly flooded with the unencrypted logs of my deleted emails, followed instantly by the original, unfiltered server logs, proving that Chloe had hijacked my digital signature to approve the hardware requisitions. The silence in the room was absolute, suffocating, and deafening. The lead auditor, the stern woman in the gray suit, leaned forward. Her sharp eyes rapidly scanned the raw data streams, the matching internet protocol addresses, and the timestamps of the forged signatures. She was a financial predator, and she immediately recognized a bleeding carcass when she saw one. "What exactly are we looking at here?" the lead auditor demanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Chloe scrambled desperately. She grabbed her executive tablet, her fingers frantically stabbing at the screen to regain control of the presentation matrix. "This is a malicious hack. She is projecting fake data to sabotage us. Shut it down. Somebody shut the system down right now." She furiously punched in her root administrative credentials. The system aggressively rejected her. A massive red access denied prompt flashed on her screen and mirrored onto the main projector for everyone to see. The dead man's switch had worked flawlessly. Every single piece of administrative authority she possessed had been digitally revoked and incinerated. "The data is pulling live from your internal network," the lead auditor stated, her tone shifting from curious to absolutely hostile. She closed her golden pen with a sharp, definitive click. She looked directly at the chief executive officer, who was now clutching the edge of the table, his face entirely drained of color. "This public offering is officially frozen. We are launching a full forensic audit into every single hardware purchase your executive team has made in the last 12 months. Do not attempt to move a single asset." The $300 million deal officially evaporated into thin air in less than 60 seconds. The chief executive officer collapsed back into his chair, his breathing ragged, staring in absolute, horrified realization at the massive screen, and then at his daughter-in-law. Chloe was completely paralyzed. The arrogant, untouchable executive facade was entirely gone. Her hands were violently shaking. Her face was completely pale, and tears of sheer panic began welling up in her eyes as she desperately stammered, trying to formulate a lie that could save her from federal prison. I walked slowly toward the glass table. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the thick, black master keycard, and placed it gently on the glass surface right in front of Chloe. "Congratulations on your successful cloud migration, Director," I said softly, the sarcasm dripping from every single syllable. I turned on my heel and walked out of the glass doors. The shouting and the frantic chaos erupted behind me, but I did not stop. I strode straight through the lobby, pushed the heavy front doors open, and stepped out into the bright, warm morning sun, never once looking back at the burning wreckage I had just left behind. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you found today's story satisfying and want to support the channel, please consider joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon community. We have an amazing collection of exclusive, highly detailed, real-life revenge stories featuring incredible voice acting that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can join us right now by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link provided in the video description or the pinned comment. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next story.